Hey to all metal maniacs, here we are with another subject and another video discussing issues and matters related to heavy metal. For those who have been following this channel, last week I uploaded a video with me ranking the albums of Black Sabbath. Since some weeks ago I had already done the same video for Judas Priest. There is literally one band missing from such a treatment in order to cover the holy trinity of heavy metal, and that band is obviously Iron Maiden. So here we are ranking the albums of this legendary UK band from worst to best as usual. So get comfortable and here we go for today's video. Let's go. Thanks for joining us again for this video. If you are new here, the aim of this channel is to review albums, festivals, suggest bands, delve into the cultural aspects of heavy metal in general and more. So if you're interested in this content, please consider supporting this channel by subscribing, liking, clicking the bell, sharing our videos on social media as well. Back to today's topic, and like other videos with legendary bands, I'm going to delve a bit into the band's history, but not too much, as this is a very famous band and most of you will already know the basic stuff. But just in case, Iron Maiden are an English heavy metal band formed in Leyton, East London in 1975 by bassist and primary songwriter Steve Harris. Iron Maiden are considered as one of the pioneering bands of the new wave of British heavy metal, which had its peak period between 1978 and 83. It is during this time that Maiden initially built a huge following in both London and throughout the UK through various gigs, and then subsequently conquered Europe and the world. They have released a total of 40 albums, which comprise of 16 studio albums, which will be the ones I will be ranking on this video, 13 live albums, 7 compilations and 4 EPs. The band's peak with regard to studio albums came in the 80s after releasing a series of UK and US platinum and gold albums, but not everything that came afterwards was below par, and we'll see that throughout this video. An interesting fact is that Iron Maiden was the first heavy metal band to ever be featured on MTV during its first day on August 1st, 1981. The track Iron Maiden was music video number 16 and Red Child was number 33 out of the first 62 videos they played. The good old days of MTV, which didn't last very long, unfortunately. Anyways, enough with the introductions and let's head towards the albums ranked lowest on this list, and the first one is XFactor, released in 1995 with EMI Records. This was the first record with Blaze Bayley after the departure of Bruce Dickinson, who according to him was due to wanting to focus on his solo career. Now I have to say I love Blaze's work with Wolfsbane. Go check them out if you haven't listened to them yet, but with Iron Maiden I was never fully convinced that he was a perfect fit. The XFactor was kind of confusing in the end. There is a noticeable lack of cohesion in the music, sounding like each member did what he wanted to do and didn't listen to the others basically. While Harris has always been the key writing influence in Maiden, on the XFactor it sounds like he felt lonely without Smith and Dickinson, of course. The songs one after the other are weak and uninspired, with the exception of The Edge of Darkness. Sign of the Cross and The Unbeliever are also worth listening to and are, I think, the only saving graces on an otherwise lackluster effort. And in position 15 I included Virtual 11, released in 1988 with EMI records. This is the second album with Blaze, and I'm putting it a step higher than XFactor solely on the basis of the greatness of one track in particular, and that is The Clansman, which for me is one of the best Iron Maiden tracks ever. Futuril is also quite a good opener, but the rest is pretty uninspired and repetitive. But the Clansman track is utterly superlative, and the lyrics really stand out and complement the music in such a beautiful way. In the 14th position we have The Final Frontier, released in 2010 with EMI Records. Post 2000s and after Bruce rejoined the band, Iron Maiden had a very interesting and very clear trajectory. Their tracks became longer, their sound much more proggy. Even Bruce's vocals were more often than not on the higher register compared to the 80s records, and I feel as if all of this came to culmination on this record. Those who have been following my videos know that I'm not a big prog metal fan, but that is not to say that this is a bad record, but it feels like they're artistically trying to widen their boundaries but not really finding what they are looking for. Most of the tracks on here don't have a specific direction, there isn't much of cohesion, and I don't find myself going back to this record in reality. No tracks stand out, but then again I can put it further down, as all in all it is quite a good effort. One of those records which has potential but kind of fizzles out and leaving no trace. The Man Who Would Be King, I think, would be the best track on this record. And in 13th place I included A Matter of Life and Death, released in 2006 with EMI Records, as well as most of these records. The same feelings I mentioned about The Final Frontier can be adopted towards this record, with some points in favor of A Matter of Life and Death. The prog elements are here as well, but less invasive. The heavy parts are a bit more prominent as well, and overall this one has better tracks which, at least to me personally, have left a bigger mark compared to The Final Frontier. Tracks like Brighter Than a Thousand Suns, For the Greater Good of God, The Reincarnation of Benjamin Brigg, and my favorite, The Longest Day, referencing the Normandy landings in World War II. It is actually not the first time Iron Maiden have used war and history-related subjects in their music, but the lyrics here are very poignant. And in 12th place, going back to 1990, and I bring you No Prayer for the Dying. Seeing that No Prayer for the Dying came between Seventh Son of the Seventh Son and Fear of the Dark, it kind of could be forgiven for being rather lackluster in comparison, but then it's not only a weak record when compared to its successor and predecessor, it's just plain uninspired to me. There are, however, a few good tracks: Tail Gunner, Fate's Warning, and Bring Your Daughter to the Slaughter, which was originally recorded by Bruce Dickinson for the soundtrack of the film A Nightmare on Elm Street 5, The Dream Child, released in '89. These tracks show that the band had not woken up one day and found their talent and creativity missing. It just seems to be that they seem to be in a hurry kind of to finish up and release this album, and didn't really bother to get the songs to sound as good as they could. Moving on, and in 11th place I have included the last album by the band, The Book of Souls, released in 2015 with Parlophone Records. I have to say I liked this record more than I thought I would in the first place. Whilst I wasn't convinced by the later releases of the band, as you have just heard me say, this one really was a step or two better than those later records. There is also a mix of short tracks with longer ones, which creates a nice balance. Actually, the shorter ones here are amongst my favorite on this record. Speed of Light, for example, The Great Unknown, When River Runs Deep, Death or Glory, and Tears of a Clown show how Maiden are still able to pull out some of those galloping riffs from their heyday. But then again, longer tracks like the 18-minute Empire of the Clouds, and probably my favorite on here, The Red and the Black, which is a brilliant track, one of the best from the band's discography if you ask me. Yes, this was very much above my expectations at the time, and I still love to revisit the album every now and then. And in 10th place I bring you Dance of Death, released in 2003. We go back with EMI Records. Let's get one thing out of the way. This is the worst cover art ever done by Maiden. Bad on both a technical and, more importantly, on an aesthetical basis. The music, on the other hand, is quite good, a mix of great tracks and some acceptable ones. Let me start with the best track here, being Passchendaele. Just like the track The Longest Day on A Matter of Life and Death album, this track speaks about an important event, this time from World War I, that is the Battle of Passchendaele, and the atrocities it brought with it. Again, the lyrics are so brilliantly put. There is a great guitar solo on here as well, courtesy of Adrian Smith. Another great track here is the title track, plenty of epic feelings on here with touches of Tin Lizzy at times. Rainmaker, Gates of Tomorrow and Face in the Sand are those acceptable tracks as well. All in all, it is a good record considering everything. And we have arrived at the 9th position, and we have here the album Fear of the Dark, released in 1992. It wasn't easy for me to put this record in this position, as initially I had thought of putting it further up, but then again I really can't put it further up because the albums that follow I feel are better records, obviously. Let's say I surprised myself with the position in the end of this record. There are definitely some amazing epic highlights like Afraid to Shoot Strangers and obviously title track Fear of the Dark, some solid Iron Maiden shorter songs like Be Quick or Be Dead and Judas Be My Guide, Wasting Love and Childhood's End, which have their good moments. But you have some fillers here and some average songs like Weekend Warrior and The Apparition or From Here to Eternity. This album kind of lacks consistency, but can definitely be regarded as a weaker album from the whole discography of Iron Maiden. And in the 8th position I decided to include Brave New World, released in the year 2000. This is a very important album to me because at the time I remember I was a 16-year-old just discovering or beginning to discover heavy metal, and obviously when this album came out it was all over the news. Household internet was in its very infancy, so access towards heavy metal wasn't that big for a mid-teenage boy who wasn't connected with anyone who was into the style of music. But then this record came out, I remember playing it over and over again. It was a big gateway for me to more underground heavy metal. At the time I had only kind of listened to the more famous Maiden tracks, but this record kind of I knew it by heart. All of this basically to tell you that although it doesn't compare with the 80s record, it's still a great comeback for both Bruce Dickinson and Adrian Smith, and after the 2 album stint by Blaze Bayley. In fact, it is included right in the middle of this list, hence not included with the weaker albums, but not with the top ones either, kind of. Anyways, tracks like The Wicker Man, Ghost of the Navigator, Dream of Mirrors, one of my favorites on here, and The Nomad are for me exceptional tracks. This was actually the first record that had hints of that prog metal towards which the band was kind of veering towards. Now, reaching the section of the best records of Iron Maiden, it was quite difficult for me to position the albums from here onwards, maybe except a couple. They would probably change according to my mood, but anyways, here it goes. In 7th position I bring you Power Slave, released in 1984. I know many who view this record as one of Maiden's best, if not their absolute best, but I guess the fact ASUS-I and 2 Minutes to Midnight have been thoroughly overplayed throughout the years kind of made me despise those tracks even more. Lost for Words is an okay instrumental, Flash of the Blade, which was used on the soundtrack to the 1985 Dario Argento movie Phenomena, along with Power Slave, are definitely my favorite here. Rime of the Ancient Mariner is a great epic track, and Back to the Village is kind of a filler for me. never liked that track as well. The cover art is one of the best, though possibly only second to another album coming up very soon. Definitely a classic album, although I feel it is a bit overrated at times. And in 6th place I decided to include Peace of Mind, released in 1983 with obviously EMI Records. Side A of this record is a Metalhead's Heaven. Riffs, melody, great production, one of Iron Maiden's best actually. It was also the first one to feature Nico McBrain on drums, replacing Clive Burr, rest in peace. Where Eagles Dare, Flight of the Icarus, Revelations and Die With Your Boots On are all exceptional tracks. Side B opens up with another overplayed track, The Trooper, which compared to the other tracks from Power Slave, this doesn't bother me that much. Still Life is another great track on here with a brilliant rendition of Bruce on vocals. The last 3 tracks are okay, but not great according to my tastes at least. But definitely one of the top albums by the band. And then 5th place, Seventh Son of the Seventh Son, released in 1988, also with EMI Records. Really should have put this album in 7th place, kind of to close the circle. Anyways, I have always had a special relationship with the number 7 from my birth date to every other number assigned to me during the school years and whatever I participated in. The number 7 was always with me, but metaphysical numerals apart, this record is truly a brilliant album. I really love the opener, Moonchild. It incorporates everything that is great with Iron Maiden, melody, catchy riffs, powerful vocals. One of the best openers on an album with regards to Iron Maiden for sure. It is followed by Infinite Dreams, another great track. Can I Play With Madness is a step lower, but still a nice track. Then The Evil That Men Do, which is one of my absolute favorites by Maiden. The epic of the album is obviously the title track, which brings with it that mystical aura that kind of permeates throughout the whole album really. The Clairvoyant and Only the Good Die Young close this album off. So all in all, one of the band's best, apart from a couple of kind of weaker tracks. But I think it deserves the place it is in because it's a bit better than Power Slave and Peace of Mind. And missing out on the podium in 4th position is The Number of the Beast, released in 1982. Probably the band's most famous album. Surely the one that projected the band to worldwide visibility. It was the first one with Bruce Dickinson on vocals, an addition to the band that brought them more versatility, which makes this record kind of a mix of the earlier, rawer stuff mixed with a more powerful type of sound, which became synonymous with Maiden throughout their career. The first album on here that hasn't got a track which I can pinpoint as a filler track. Maybe the weaker one for me would be Gangland. The rest is top notch, especially Children of the Damned, again one of my absolute favorites from the band. 22 Acacia Avenue, The Number of the Beast of course, and the utterly brilliant Hallowed Be Thy Name, which could easily be a top 3 Maiden track in absolute. Considering the quality of the album and the impact this had on the whole metal scene, it deserves to be in the highest positions. So The Number of the Beast in 4th place. I think a lot will put this album actually in number 1 spot. But anyways, in 3rd place I bring you Somewhere in Time, released in 1986. First things first, this is undoubtedly the best cover art of a full-length album from the band's discography. There are so many hidden messages in it, and it oozes so much of that 80s vibe. Definitely one of my all-time favorite covers in general. In reality, it took me a number of years to fully appreciate this record. I know when it was released, many fans were disappointed because of the inclusion of keyboards on here, but I was never kind of bothered by that, even though I'm not really a big fan of keyboards. I feel this was a period where Iron Maiden started moving towards that more prog style, By no means this is as proggy as post-2000 albums, but one can feel that they were pushing the limits in a somewhat calculated way, I might add. The only weaker track here could be Sea of Madness and even Heaven Can Wait, which could have been trimmed out by a couple of minutes. I think it's about 7 minutes, around 5 minutes it would have been ideal. What makes this record so great are the tracks Wasted Years, Deja Vu, The Loneliness of the Long Distance Runner, and my #1 track from Iron Maiden in general, Alexander the Great. Such an epic ride into the life of this historical figure leaves me kind of breathless every time I listen to this track. So yes, I think Somewhere in Time is somewhat an underrated album compared to Maiden's discography, but anyways. For the runner-up spot, I present to you Killers, released in 1981. The second record with Paul Di'Anno on vocals. This was obviously a different Maiden here, a more inexperienced group of musicians with a sound definitely more rooted in the new wave or British heavy metal. Di'Anno came from a punk background and brought with him a more in-your-face DIY attitude to the music, and frankly it is the kind of sound and attitude that really appeals to me. As much as I meander within the realm of heavy metal, I kind of always come back to those dirty, filthy and savage sounds. And this record is pretty much that, from the first notes of Ides of March to the last notes on Drifter. You are served with a relentless onslaught of riffs, great guitar solos, plenty of melody. As a young and raw as these guys were, this was truly revolutionary, and that is why they captured the attention of such a big label as EMI at such an early stage of their career. I have to make a special mention to a track on here that has never been played live by the band. I have no idea what the reasons are, but I hope they are valid ones, because never delivering a live version of Prodigal Son is truly a shame. Such a beautiful track with an exceptional mid-section guitar solo. Let's hope Iron Maiden, before they close off their career, can play this live at some point. And for the top spot, you have surely understood which album is left, and this is actually the debut self-titled Iron Maiden, released in 1980 with obviously EMI Records. What I said about the sound and the energy that can be attributed to Killers can be attributed also to this record. There isn't much difference between the two of them, it's just that I think that this record is slightly better than Killers, but just by a hairline, and that hairline might actually be the track Strange World, and how great of a track that is. Makes you fall in love with the sound of the guitar, which kind of pierces your heart and leaves an indelible mark for the rest of your life. At least that is what it did to me. Remember Tomorrow, the instrumental Transylvania, Running Free, Charlotte the Harlot, the title track, not a weak track in sight for me, just plain perfection. They got it right the first time. Just one of heavy metal's all-time classic albums in general, and truly a blessing that we are able to witness such greatness. And I guess that is it. 16 great records, some greater than others of course, but very respectable discography by one of the greatest bands in heavy metal history. I have to admit that this ranking was much more difficult than I expected it to be, both in the lower half, but especially in the top part, except the first two positions, which were strictly for the two Di'Anno records. But from position 7 to 3, my mind was going to explode basically. Anyways, let me know in the comments your opinions, the ranking and the reasons behind them, if possible. I just love these discussions, as on previous videos. I also hope you got some interesting information on these records as well, which makes you maybe revisit this band if you have not listened to them in quite a while. Anyways, it's important to subscribe, like the video, click on the bell to be notified. Also, if possible, share this and many other videos on social media or dedicated forums, etc. That would really help us out. Also, check out the affiliate links. Like I always say, a small commission to us with no extra expense to the buyer. Last but not least, take care, stay safe, and metal on. Cheers.